Hey guys, before we get started, I just wanted to address real quick that yes, we will be making the Batman and Harley Quinn timeline video. We're just waiting for the prequel and sequel comics to finish coming out. They're taking their sweet time with those, but fear not. Now, on to the video. Wonder Woman is regarded as one of DC's most recognizable and successful characters, on TV, in movies, and on comic book or newsstand shelves since her creation at the hands of William Moulton Marston in 1941. In fact, let's just revoke that regarded as I said earlier and just look at the box office intake from her first solo film. Holy hell! She's been brought to life in motion pictures by many a talented lady, though we tend to think Susan Eisenberg is the best among them, and written gloriously in comics by many a talented human being, though it's debatable whether or not Greg Rucka, Gail Simone, or George Perez are in fact gods themselves. Of course, our preferred version of the character comes from the DC animated universe. I mean, look what YouTube channel this is. What did you expect? This iteration of the character was first introduced in the pilot episode of Justice League Secret Origins, and her backstory and world were explored further in future JL and JLU episodes like Paradise Lost, Fury, and The Balance. As far as we can gather from these shows, her DCAU origin takes cues from various source materials and goes a little something like this. Ted, you gotta press play on the boombox? Yes, we still have a boombox. Once upon a time, the Greek gods created the Amazons, a race of female warriors that inhabited the uncharted island of Themyscira. At one point, Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, fell in love with Hades, who, long story short, went on to incite war among the gods and wound up banished to Tartarus for thousands of years, but not before possibly helping Hippolyta mold a baby out of clay. I mean, the clay baby was sculpted for sure, but it's debatable whether or not Hades was actually there, or whether he's just a manipulative bastard who wants people to think he was. Either way, the gods granted clay baby life, and she grew up to become Diana, princess of Themyscira, daughter of Hippolyta, breaker of chains, and mother of skip some of that last part. She trained for years on Themyscira to become one of their mightiest warriors, and then weird squishy aliens came to destroy Earth, and she was like, hey, this isn't cool, can I go help everybody? And Polly's all, no, not at all. So Diana goes to the Temple of Athena, steals a Wonder Woman suit, and the rest is history. But James, I already knew all this stuff. Why are you telling me things I already know? How am I supposed to know what you know or don't know? Just calm down and let me talk. It's seemingly established that this is the world's first introduction to Wonder Woman. Little girls don't know who she is.
You're not my sister?
Perfume salesmen don't know who she is.
It's the latest scent.
Even the rest of the soon-to-be Justice League doesn't know who she is.
Who's the rookie in the tiara? I'm not sure.
Where have you been all my life?
Themyscira.
Huh?
As far as anyone is concerned, Wonder Woman is brand new to the scene, never made an appearance in man's world until now. So then, explain this Superman episode to me, which takes place years earlier.
Yeah, right. I'm Wonder Woman.
Why did you do that? The TV Tropes website refers to this as a mythology gag, something that commonly happens in fictional works all the time. It occurs when a cartoon or movie or book or whatever refers to something else from its own original source material or pokes fun in a sort of breaking the fourth wall meta way at something keen fans will catch on to.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Other examples include this line.
What? Like a bunch of super friends?
Or the insane amount of times people paraphrase the "look, up in the sky" spiel. There's also a handful of meta moments sprinkled throughout the shows like Jay Garrick's helmet, this Linda Carter-y transformation, or the Justice Lord's Flash Brainiac robot thing looking a hell of a lot like the Reverse Flash. There's also a Static Shock episode where Static says even Clark Kent has a day job, but they cut the line in subsequent airings because, well, the show became part of the DCAU and that probably shouldn't be public knowledge. So is this just one of those things? I mean, it could be. If you want the video to end now, that is. But is there a canonical explanation? Is there something actually in universe that could provide reasoning? Well, I'm glad you asked, dearie, because I'm going to tell you. There's a couple of possibilities here. Let's explore numero uno firstly, which is simply this. Diana is not the first Wonder Woman after all. In the JLU episode Hawk and Dove, Diana visits Hephaestus to question him about the Annihilator armor that's meanwhile walking around blowing up half of Casnia because Ares likes it when things blow up. While she's there, old Heifer mentions he actually originally created the armor for Hippolyta.
I made that armor for your mother. Did she ever thank me? No. I love your mom, but she didn't have your build.
As creepy as this guy is, he brings up an interesting notion. He originally made the Wonder Woman armor for Hippolyta, but why? In DC Comics lore, there have not only been countless versions of the Justice League, but also a team from the World War II era, the Justice Society of America. The JSA was a long-standing superhero team in the comics, predating the Justice League by roughly 20 years, but the group never made a proper appearance in the animated universe. In fact, the closest we ever got to a Justice Society was the Justice Guild in the JL episode Legends. This team featured analogs of the JSA in the form of the Streak, Catman, Tom Turbine, Black Siren, and Green Guardsman, who were more or less identical in every way to the Golden and Silver Age Justice Societies. One such member of the comic book JSA was, you guessed it, Wonder Woman. I mean, maybe you didn't guess that, sorry to be presumptuous. The character actually made her comic book debut in All-Star Comics #8, the title that primarily featured the Justice Society of America. Because of a rule at DC explicitly disallowing any character with their own comic title from making regular appearances in All-Star Comics, Wonder Woman was soon demoted to the JSA's secretary because, you know, female empowerment and all. Wonder Woman was never referred to by any other name and was just plain Wonder Woman in JSA Comics for years, until the late 90s when Diana's absence called for her mother, Queen Hippolyta, to take the mantle temporarily, and after a time travel mishap, as often happens in this medium, she became stuck in the 1940s and became a member of the JSA. If you're confused right now, it's okay. So am I. But the point is, Hippolyta being Wonder Woman isn't a new idea. It's not out of the question. So, is it possible the Justice Society existed in the DCAU as well? We never saw them, but then again, we never saw the Teen Titans either, and they're known to exist now, aren't they? So, for comparison's sake, let's pretend the JSA did exist at some point in the animated universe. In the comics, the core membership of this team has fluctuated over the decades, but we've seen tons of societeers that have, at one time or another, made an appearance in the DCAU. Dr. Fate, Hourman, Atom Smasher, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Johnny Thunder, Thunderbolt, Dr. Midnight, Wildcat, Black Canary, Sand, Stargirl, Stripe, Captain Marvel, Obsidian, and Mr. Terrific, as well as versions of Starman and Commander Steel, and of course, Wonder Woman. Now, when you take a look at all these guys' appearances in the cartoons, you have to take into consideration a couple of things. One, could the Justice Society have existed before the Justice League? And two, if so, does the timeline line up? In JL and JLU, it's alluded to a few times that the creation of the League may be the first time a significant superhero group has come together. Prior to Secret Origins, there definitely doesn't appear to be any known collection of these guys. They're just kind of scattered around. Superman's in Metropolis, Batman's in Gotham, Flash is in Central, Jon Stewart's off doing who knows what, Hawkgirl's hawkgirling about, Jean is sleeping on Mars disguised as a little pointy rock maybe? And then there's Wonder Woman, who's daydreaming about being where the people are, wanting to see them dancing, walking around on those, what do you call them? Feet? When the gooey aliens come down and Jean telepathically summons everybody, these superheroes are the ones that show up. It could be because they're the only ones active at the time. If all those other heroes I mentioned were around, then why didn't they show up? One reason might be that the writers wrote it that way, but later in the episode Secret Society, when the League splits up for a bit, Green Lantern says,
"We could have been the greatest fighting force in the history of the universe."
I mean, yeah, I guess. Superman and Jean alone are probably more powerful than the entirety of the Justice Society combined, but it seems Jon Stewart hasn't heard of the JSA before, at least. Then again, he's always off in space doing space stuff, especially prior to Secret Origins, but he was in the Marines before becoming a Green Lantern and grew up during the Cold War, so I'd say it's highly likely if a big superhero team was around a couple decades beforehand, he and a lot of other people probably would have heard of them. Plus, John worshipped his Justice Guild comics as a kid. You'd think that if some guys were flying around outside his window looking just like them, that he'd take notice. So things aren't looking good, but if we let that all slide and assume the Justice Society did exist in the DCAU at some point, do the characters' ages and appearances even make any sense? Right away, we can rule out a few members of the team. Stargirl and Johnny Thunder are far too young, Hawkman doesn't debut until well into JLU's run, Hawkgirl doesn't come to Earth until 5 years before Starcrossed, and Captain Marvel is technically in elementary school in the 2000s, leaving us with these guys. Dr. Fate is plausible. We know he sealed Karkal away 100 years or so before his appearance in Superman the Animated Series, so it's likely the Helmet of Naboo actually keeps him so young and so fresh and so clean. The Hourman in JLU could be the second Hourman, aka Rick Tyler, son of Rex Tyler, the first Hourman, if you're following my math here, meaning the original Hourman is definitely a possibility. The same goes for Dr. Midnight and Mr. Terrific, who could both be the second versions of the characters as seen in the comics, and Black Canary, who could conceivably be the daughter of the original. Sand and Stripe can't be ruled out either, who may have been their kid sidekick selves at one point. Atom Smasher, Obsidian, Starman, and Commander Steel could arguably be older than they look, or at least be in the same age group as Hourman, Dr. Midnight, and Mr. Terrific, meaning the DCAU simply skipped over the original versions of the latter characters. Penultimately, that means second to last, we have Wildcat, who is said to have trained JLU's Black Canary as well as many other members of the League. In the comics, he additionally trained and or fought alongside Batman, Catwoman, and a few others, so it's not impossible he was around a while before Bruce Wayne became Batman in the DCAU's modern age. And lastly, Wonder Woman. Let's just assume for the sake of this theory that she's Hippolyta here. This would mean that the core group of JSAers would look something like this, and maybe even Jay Garrick too, if we take the appearance of his helmet to be literal. I mean, he and Alan Scott and the Spectre all appeared in the spin-off Justice League Unlimited comics. Wait, no, those aren't canon. But could they have existed during World War II, as is the norm for this team? Hippolyta's as old as frickin' time itself, so maybe. Okay, that's not true. I mean, first this big hand here created the universe, and the Lords of Order and Chaos, and then the New Gods, and okay, maybe this is a topic for another video. But the rest, even the oldest possible member, Wildcat, would have to be pretty damn old.
Looks pretty spry for a guy who's got to be, what, mid-80s?
So maybe they didn't exist in World War II. Maybe they didn't exist at all. We don't know for sure about the Justice Society, but we do know about WW2 heroes like the Blackhawks and Easy Company, or even Spy Smasher. And we know post-World War superheroes existed prior to the modern day, like Soul Power and Sparky in the 1960s. But if the JSA did exist, it would give credit to Hephaestus' explanation of the Wonder Woman armor, and it would explain why said armor is just kind of lying around on Themyscira. It couldn't be meant for Diana. Hippolyta had to have worn it at some point, but she does seem very against Diana going to man's world. Did she go there in the past? Did something happen to her that made her really touchy when it comes to men? Or anti-touchy, I guess? However, it could be that Hippolyta was gifted this armor and then either did very little with it or maybe even did nothing with it. We've seen multiple instances in the DCAU of comic characters' origins being mixed or combined for the sake of introducing a modern version while retaining the classic origin. Wally West is the Flash but is struck by lightning in an identical manner to the comic book Barry Allen. Kyle Rayner is gifted Abin Sur's power ring in the same manner Hal Jordan is supposed to. Crotalic is basically Hawkman in name. Galatea is basically Power Girl in appearance. DCAU Tim Drake is basically Jason Todd. The list goes on. The creative team behind these cartoons have never been shy about presenting their DC universe in the format that best fits the stories they want to tell, and honestly is part of what makes me love it so much. So it's not too far-fetched to assume that if the Justice Society was present at some point during the DCAU timeline, the team may have been comprised of various incarnations of associated superheroes, depending on what works best. It's pretty up to interpretation. I mean, none of these guys ever mentions, oh yeah, I was on a team like this once a few years/decades ago. We also called it the Justice something. What a coincidence! But I digress. So, is there any other reason a 1990s Lois Lane would have heard of Wonder Woman? This brings me to another theory, which I personally think is really interesting. Lois Lane is Wonder Woman. Think about it. They both have black hair. They're both women. She even says so in the clip.
Yeah, right. I'm Wonder Woman. I'm Wonder Woman. I'm Wonder Woman.
I'm just kidding. Please don't stop watching this video. Okay, in the Justice League Season 1 episode, The Savage Time, the League travels back in time to World War II to stop Vandal Savage from changing the past with an army of Nazis but not Nazis. When they arrive, Wonder Woman kind of splits off from the rest of the group and winds up teaming up with Steve Trevor to punch some Germans and throw some cars. Steve has obviously never seen anyone like Diana before. She has the strength and speed of the gods, and he rightfully refers to her as Angel. After the League defeats Vandal Savage and returns to the present, Wonder Woman visits Steve in his retirement home and they have a nice little reunion. But is there perhaps a more tragic layer to this scene? If you think about it, the Justice League have inadvertently created a sort of time loop. Because they reverted the world back to what it was supposed to be, that means the world they were all living in prior to this episode was, all along, a world in which the Justice League helped win World War II. You know, like 50-something years before the League would form in the first place. Time was just chugging along, la la la, and then suddenly the Justice League poofed out of nowhere, blew up some tanks, blew up some planes, blew up some people, and then disappeared. They fought alongside American soldiers left and right. They even fought with them at Normandy. D-Day. That was kind of a big deal. So there's no way that soldiers from both sides that made it home from the war would just walk into their houses and have their wives be all, anything crazy happen over there? And then just respond, nah, just regular old World War II. No. They'd start blabbering about supermen and redheads with bird wings all over town. But would people have believed them? Would people that weren't there hear, yeah, a flying guy put his fist out and then a magic green bubble surrounded me and I didn't die, and think, okay, yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable? Probably not. When you think of it that way, they probably either kept their mouths shut or were sent to some kind of insane asylum, which really makes things pretty depressing. But what about Steve Trevor? He watched Wonder Woman do all sorts of crazy things. He ended up in a normal old folks home, so did he just keep it to himself? Maybe because he knew people would think he was nuts, or maybe because he didn't want other people to know about his angel. If we take liberties with all of this, as we are currently doing, have you even been paying attention? Let's say Steve Trevor did tell people about his experience with Wonder Woman, and they did think he was kind of wacko, and they didn't shut him up somewhere unhealthy. If he started telling people about her as early as the 1940s, you'd think that rumor would get pretty far. I mean, he wasn't the only one to see her during the war either. Several other soldiers and resistance spies saw her or fought alongside her. Since she suddenly disappeared without a trace, a Wonder Woman legend could totally have become a thing. A story of the heroic goddess that punched just enough Vandal Savage Nazis to be memorable. But why just her? Why not the other members of the Justice League? They were there too, and there's no inkling of a Superman legend or Flash Fish story. Well, I mean, look at her. She's pretty unforgettable.
And what's wrong with the way I dress?
But seriously, think about men in World War II. They painted strip-teasing chicks on their bombs, for Pete's sake. It was an era of testosterone and rampant sexism. Wonder Woman helps stop some bad guys, and this handful of soldiers immediately jumps to catcalling and calling her doll. They honestly probably didn't even notice the big blueberry with the S on his chest. This time loop theory could very well even play into the Justice Society idea, where perhaps the appearance of the Leaguers during the war inspired others to take up superheroing. Maybe then the future Justice League members were inspired by the off-screen Justice Society, meaning they were inspired by themselves. They're their own grandpas. Also, check out Superman Adventures number 21. This issue is written by Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer, who also wrote the Superman episode Little Girl Lost. This comic is essentially an extension of that episode, both with past tense origin info and a continuation of the episode in the second half. Unfortunately, a lot of the present day story contradicts info from the cartoon, but since it has the same creative team, who no doubt had this story in mind when they were writing the companion episode, if we assume everything in this comic leading up to Little Girl Lost is canon, we have an interesting conundrum. This panel right here. We see a Wonder Woman poster on Supergirl's wall. Supergirl is Wonder Woman, confirmed. Realistically, this can be explained when understanding that the Superman Adventures comic ran concurrently with the series Adventures in the DC Universe, a sometimes canon, sometimes not comic title helmed by both DCAU creatives and silly poo-poo pantses who just wanted to have fun drawing Batman. What? Don't look at me. Because they existed simultaneously, often Superman Adventures issues would reference or take cues from Adventures in the DC Universe. In fact, later in this very Supergirl issue, she talks about the Justice League. If this issue is before the League forms, meaning it's before Diana comes to Man's World, why does Supergirl have a poster of her on her wall? Could it be because this is just a poster of the idea of Wonder Woman? Someone whose legend she looks up to? Like, she could have a poster of Joan of Arc, or Calamity Jane, or Angelina Jolie. So what's going on here? Is Wonder Woman a legend among man? A moniker passed down through the generations? Or is this just another one of those mistake things? Let us know what you think about Legends of the Hidden Wonder Woman, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and or Instagram at DCAU Watchtower. If you like these videos and would like to see more of them more often, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. We also have a second channel, if you weren't aware, JTS Entertainment, where we make comedy sketches, movie reviews, and all sorts of other stuff. It's where you may have seen this little ditty a couple years ago. That's linked below, and we just recently did a Justice League review, so you'll want to check it out, because I assume you like Justice League, and you know what they say about assuming. You're usually right. Thank you for watching as always, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on other upcoming content from the Watchtower Database.